He heard someone actually speak of a friend of his, Lazarus, is actually dead. He's been dead for about 4 days now. And the disciples tell Jesus about this, and he says, what do you want us to do? And he goes, we're going to go see him, we're going to go wake him up. And they're like, wake him up, he's been dead for 4 days. And this is a little part of what happens. And this is actually in John 11, and so John 11:38, and it's entitled Lazarus Risen from the Dead. And this is just a little quick story about what was going on. Like I said, they go to see Lazarus. He's behind a tomb with a rock over it, and Martha and Mary were crying, and Jesus was weeping, so he decided to bring Lazarus back to life. And it says, like I said, it's on John 11:38. It says, then Jesus again groaned in himself, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone laid against it. Jesus said, take the stone away. Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, Lord, by this time there is a stench, for he has been dead for 4 days. Jesus said to her, did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God? Then he took away the stone from the place where the dead was laying. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you for you have heard me. And I know that you always hear me, but because of the people who are standing by, I say this, that you may believe you sent me. Now when he had said these things, he cried out a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And he who has died came out, bound from head to toe, or head to foot, with gray clothing, and his face was wrapped with cloth. Jesus said to them, loosen him and let him go. So you can just imagine what was going on. All these people standing around looking at Jesus and looking at this miracle that actually happened. He brought someone back from the dead after being dead for 4 days. He was probably stench, smelled, and there wasn't very much medication back then as far as preserving the body. And he actually brought him back to life. That's just amazing. That's crazy. And like I said, you can either look at this book and say it's the biggest lie that it ever was, or the biggest truth. And the next thing that happened, or the next biggest miracle that actually happened with Jesus, is actually he died on the cross and he risen from the dead. And that's what makes it so amazing, because he is the only God that actually risen from the dead, conquered death. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about his body and his blood and his resurrection. Like I said, what happens is that after this miracle, a lot of people didn't like Jesus, and they're actually trying to pursue to kill him, because he actually was called himself the Son of God, which is blasphemy. But it wasn't blasphemy, because he was the Son of God. And at the Last Supper, the last meal before Judas betrays him, he describes his body was broken for you, and his blood was shed for you, so that you might be born again, that your sins might be wiped away, and you might be welcomed into heaven. And they pursued Jesus. Judas rats on him, and he was crucified. And he was dead for 3 days, and he resurrected on the third. And he ascended down to heaven to give his message out. And that's the most amazing thing. That's the true meaning of God, is if he didn't conquer death and he didn't perform all these miracles, how do we know he was God? But he was God because he did all these things. And that leads me to believe, who are you with God, and where do you stand? You might believe in Jesus Christ, but you maybe never actually were born again. And I'm going to just show you what that looks like here. Who are you? And the first thing we have to look at is what the commandments say about the Bible. there's 10 commandments, if you haven't known already. And the 10 commandments are, do not worship any other God. Do not make any idols. Don't make any statues or anything of any other, or praise any statue. And it says, don't use God's name in vain, pretty much. Keep the Sabbath holy. Number 5, honor your father and mother. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not lie. And do not covenant. That's the 10 commandments. And you might say, well, I'm a good person. I don't do any of that. But God's made it clear that you pretty much do 2 already. Even if you're the most perfect person, you say you do not lie. You committed murder. You committed adultery sometime today or in the past week. And that stains you from the walk with God and knowing God. And God explains this in 2 verses. He says you commit murder on a weekly basis and you commit adultery. That's just for me. And he breaks this down in Matthew's 5:21. It says, and God says, this is actually a teaching from God that commits murder of the heart. It says, but I say to you, for whoever is angry with his brother with a curse shall be in danger of judgment. And this actually explains that if you hate somebody so much or you curse somebody, you're actually killing that person of the heart. And so you're defiling one of the commandments right there. And the second one I have pulled up right here is actually in Matthew 2. It's on 5:28. And this talks about the adultery of the heart, which actually means having sex before marriage or anything else about stealing. It's pretty much stealing property. You don't own it, so you're stealing property, and that's what adultery was really meant back then. But adultery of the heart talks about, like I said in Matthew 5:28, it says, but I say unto you, this is Jesus speaking, but I say unto you, whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And so pretty much right there, Jesus, there's actually some more he talks about, but that's the 2 that really stands out for me. Hatred and adultery. And I have to deal with that almost every week that I have a problem with. And that's the one, 2 that really home run for me when I had to look at myself when Jesus came to my heart and actually had to change me so I wouldn't commit these and I would be washed away of my sins. And to get rid of those, you have to have Jesus in your heart. And he talks about this, that when you commit these sins, the only way you can have these taken away is through Jesus Christ. And it explains right here in Corinthians that Jesus actually wipes away sin so you might be closer with God. For I had deserved, like I said, it's 1 Corinthians 5:3, it says, for I deserve unto you first for all that which I also receive, how that Jesus died for